Good morning. Today is Tuesday, September the 2nd, 2025, and this is the Administration Committee meeting for Richland School District 1. It is 9:03 a.m. We're located at the Stevenson Administration Building, 1616 Richland Street, Columbia, South Carolina, 29201. And the meeting is being held in room 102. Pursuant to Freedom of Information Act, all persons, organizations, and media outlets, as requested, have been notified of the time, date, place, and agenda of this meeting. Could I get a motion, please, to adopt the agenda?
Madam Chair, I now move that we adopt the agenda as scripted or stated.
And I'd like to second that motion. Item number 2, information items. All those in favor? Aye. 2.1, Principal and Instruction Staff Reassignment presented by Dr. Kumas. 2.2, Policy KF, Public Use of School Facilities presented by Mr. Grant. 2.3, Policy KF, Public Use of School Facilities presented by Mr. Grant. 2.4, Administrative Rule KF-R, Public Use of School Facilities presented by Mr. Grant. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Kumas, Dr. Kumas.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. Board of School Commissioners, Dr. Dr. Walker, and Ms. Rivers. Going to get a little presentation this morning in reference to our employee transfers. We'll cover the teacher transfers and the administrative transfers and assignments. We're going to review the district-wide process for employees and transfers as our objective. On principal and administrative transfers, the superintendent has the responsibility for the assignment of all administrators. When changing and when transferring administrators, the superintendent will take the following considerations into the following attributes into consideration when making those transfers. The needs of the school and the district, the length of the current assignment in the school, the compatibility of the administrator style among the administrators in each of those schools, the opportunities provided for professional growth in the proposed assignment, performance evaluations, and the administrator's expressed preference. And these are all in our board policy, and they're covered under CFC with the assignment and the transfer of school administrators. Principal and administrator transfers, excuse me. Under the volunteer transfer, the principal and the administrator request a transfer through their supervisor. The executive directors, the deputy super, which was formerly our chief of staff, the chief of human resource officer, and the superintendent meet to discuss those assignment transfers. And then the superintendent makes those final transfers and the decisions. There is no actual form that they ask for this transfer. Most of them just go to their executive director or their principal. If it's an AP that's asking for a transfer, they request that. And then, of course, the EDs make the recommendation, and then we bring that before that little committee. We are looking to do a formal process for this transfer and the request, because we do have some administrators that do ask for certain transfers. So we're looking at a formal process, just like we have for teachers and other personnel. So that is one thing that is in the works. The needs-based transfer, the superintendent can make the transfer if it is on a needs basis. In that case, the superintendent will meet with the principal or the administrator, excuse me, to notify him or her of the transfer. The reason for the transfer will be provided to the person, and the principal or the administrator will conclude efforts at the current location and transition for the new assignment. And that is also under policy CFC. Instructional staff transfers. The superintendent is also authorized to assign or reassign personnel in the best interest of the district. In an assignment for instructional staff, the superintendents are considered the following factors, making the decisions and assignments and transfer of instructional staff. It's also on the needs of the students in the district. It's also where the employee is most qualified to serve and expressed employee preference. The employee can ask for a transfer. If they do, then they're actually fill out a form. They're placed on a list. The list is shared, and I'll go over that in just a minute. For transfers of a teacher, the transfer of a teacher from one school to another may be initiated by either the teacher, the principal of the school, or by the superintendent. Voluntary transfers. For a voluntary transfer, the employee requests a transfer for the next academic school year and may discuss his or her desire with his or her principal or administrator. The employee will complete the designated transfer form per the deadline. Supervisors will, with vacancies, can interview those qualified personnel or employees. And then based on the recommendations of two supervisors, that's the current supervisor and the supervisor requesting the person, the employee will be notified in writing of the decision. And we actually put on our intent for next year, the letter of intent is on the bottom of there, the date that they can apply for the transfer. The transfer list is shared with principals. At that point, the principals has a vacancy. They can request an interview with that employee, and then they can request in writing through a recommendation to hire that person to come to their building on the transfer. And there is a window. So after that window is closed, we don't allow those transfers because it becomes a vacancy for that particular principal. On a needs-based transfer, if in the opinion of the superintendent, a transfer would be in the best interest of the district will use the following procedures. The superintendent or his or her designee shall discuss the need for the transfer with the current principal or with the current immediate supervisor. The superintendent or his or her designee shall have a conference with the principal of the school and the department to which the transfer is being contemplated or sent to that person, contemplated, excuse me. The superintendent or his or her designee shall then talk with the person to be transferred, giving reason why the transfer is being made. And then refusal to transfer may result in a loss of employment, and that is in policy GCK and the administrative rule GCKR. New legislation that has has just been passed. With an assignment, school districts annually before May shall decide and notify in writing through the superintendent a teacher whom the district employs concerning his employment for the ensuing year. Now, we have 14 days before students return to notify teachers of their assignment now. And in that, we also have to notify them, and I'll go through this in just a minute, what their salary, their least amount salary will be. And I'll tell you how we actually do that. Failure to provide notification shall result in a monetary penalty deducted from the district state allocation funds, and they will charge us per teacher. So if we don't notify these folks in writing, there's a monetary disciplinary action that can be enforced on us per teacher that we do not notify. If the Board of Trustees fails to notify a teacher who has been employed by the district for a majority of the current school year of his or her status of the ensuing school year, and the employee will be re-employed for the ensuing school year. That really hasn't changed. If we don't notify them before May 1st, they have a job, whether we offer them a contract or not. So we have to notify them some way in writing whether we're going to re-employ them or not re-employ them. Teachers will be notified of tentative assignments no later than 14 calendar days. I apologize. 14 calendar days before students start and are scheduled to return to the school. And that's under 5925-410 of the South Carolina Code of Laws. Reassignments, once an assignment to a school, the teacher shall not be reassigned to work to another location in the district unless the superintendent can demonstrate the need for reassignment. If that's the case, the superintendent must provide a written notice to that teacher 5 days in advance of the reassignment unless there is a critical student need or the teacher requests the reassignment. Local boards must notify in writing of all teachers, or must be notified in writing of all teacher reassignments. So if we do a reassignment, like we're just doing now, looking at the 10-day count, if we do a reassignment, then we will notify the board in writing as to the transfers or the reassignments. And then teacher is defined as, because there were some questions in whether this is administrators or other district office personnel. It's not. Teacher is assigned as a certified teacher who is employed by a school district to teach in an academic setting. So if they're in the school in an academic setting teaching students, then we would have to notify. Okay. Any questions? I know I went through it somewhat rapidly, but are there any questions?
May have a couple of questions as a follow-up. So when we look at this presentation, why is it coming up now? Why are we presenting this now?
With the 10-day count, there could be some reassignments.
Okay.
With the
all right.
10-day count, it depends on whether, at that point, if the superintendent decides to go in that direction. It also looked at the school needs.
Mhm.
We may have some vacancies that may need to be filled. Hopefully with some of the attrition, if a school is deemed or it looks like a school could lose a position and they have a vacancy, what we would do is just cut the vacancy
Right.
and then fill with that person that's actually at the school. If they don't have a vacancy, then a decision will have to be made as to whether or not we do a transfer or we keep them on what we call an overstaff list through that year. If we keep them on the overstaff list, then next year it could be a cut during that budget season and they may lose a position, whether it's a vacancy that comes up next year or whether it's a reassignment of a teacher or a position.
So we're presenting this as an extra layer in the process so that people don't think what always happened won't happen, because it could happen. Because every year we do some reassignments, right?
We do.
And so for clarity and transparency for our education community and beyond, we're letting them know that this is something that we look at every year, and this is why we look at it.
Yes, sir.
All
It
right,
is.
thank you. I'm making that clear.
Yes, sir.
I'm not lost on this. It's just that when we have people listening and people who are part of this process, who are interested in what Richland One does, we're showing them, here's how it happens.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Second question, Chair. How are these decisions not just the best interest for the district, but also the best interest for the most underserved, historically underserved communities?
So what we do is we actually, on the 10-day count or during these transfers, if so, we definitely take a look at the vacancies that we had. A lot of times with our schools that are hard to staff,
Mhm.
those are some of the ones that we look at first.
There you go.
If we need to move someone to those positions. Some of the schools are not as hard to staff. So if they have a vacancy, we categorize them,
Thank you.
going with the hardest to staff and most needs, and then move from there as to if we have to do any transfers.
And so when we speak of those needs, right,
Mhm.
needs based, how does that speak to equitable staffing in those most historical underserved communities?
So if
You-
we look
I
at,
think you answered it, but go ahead.
yes, sir. So if we look at those hard to staff schools or the ones that are identified schools,
Mhm.
sometimes we may make a decision not to move someone, even if it is overstaffed because of their needs. If it is someone that's hard to staff and they need those teachers and we have some extra teachers somewhere else, then we can make those moves to those different schools.
And my final question, Chair, how do we measure the impact of our reassignments from year to year? How do we measure that?
I think that would be more along the lines of looking at our T&L and testing and AARE, so they can pull the data and see where they're at. There are some criteria as to not moving someone. If a teacher is at that lower percentage with their testing, then of course we won't look to move that person, especially to a school that does have needs.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. We know, and that having a certified, highly qualified teacher in the classroom, you're going to get, more effective student outcomes. And so the goal is always to have a highly qualified teacher in the classroom. So we know that generally from research. But I think for us, sort of stepping out and stepping back for a minute, context here, I mean, twofold the reason for this presentation and the other presentations that we'll be doing in the other committees is one, to give opportunity for appreciation of context and what it is that our policy says, how it is that we as a district are choosing to enact that policy. It also gives opportunities for you all as Board of Commissioners for dialogue, for reflection, and for assessment. Is there a policy that we need to change? Are there shifts that need to be made? And that may not be here. Certainly some things are statute driven and are things that we must do, but there are other places that we do have some discretion. The last thing I would say related to this is that we do understand that timeliness is critical, and we're going to ensure that we're not making changes beyond into October, certainly not into October. We won't be making staffing changes. And so we're looking really, we know after Labor Day is when you have a more accurate picture of all the students that are going to be in your school district, in the schoolhouses. And so based off of that, if there are going to be changes, those will be made expeditiously in the next couple of weeks if we're going to make shifts.
Thank you so much.
And this is a good segue, Dr. Kumas. Can you just elaborate for me? You mentioned evaluations for staff and taking some of that into consideration when making those changes. Is there anything in place to make sure that we're not just shifting people around that are not performing well to put that burden on someone else? Because oftentimes we hear principals having to start over with an evaluation on someone who wasn't performing well where they were before. That's just something to take into consideration. And that's for certified and classified staff.
Yes, ma'am.
And also the non-renewal, that wasn't mentioned in here. If a teacher is being non-renewed and having a non-renewed packet, is that person able to be placed on a transfer list? Are they able to put themselves on the transfer list? Would any consideration being given to that?
If, excuse me, if they are being non-renewed, we have to follow the law in reference to non-renewals for certified teachers and employees. If they're being non-renewed for the district, then no, ma'am, they don't go onto a transfer list and they don't transfer. We're actually excusing them from the district. If they're, and here, I think some questions came up a little bit this year also with our retirees. Our retirees are hired on that year-to-year basis. So if they're hired for that particular school for that year, if they're looking to come back to the district the next year, they don't put themselves on the transfer list. If a principal is non-renewing that retiree for that school, the retiree can actually go into our site. If they see another location that they're interested in working at, they can apply for that position there. And then we'll get those folks over to the principals so they can interview, and if they make those recommendations, and we move forward from there on those folks.
So when I asked, so with a non-renewal, I mean, I know it's a long process. And if anything is missing from that, then you have to start over. So that's what my clarification is. If it's not on it may be on an administrator that something wasn't done properly in the non-renewal packet, That's what I'm asking. Would that person still be allowed to go on the on the transfer list?
No, ma'am, they should not be.
They should
transferred.
not. Okay.
They should remain
Okay.
at that school.
And then with retirees, their evaluation system is sometimes different, correct?
It is.
Okay. So if a retiree is not performing well, normally then that's when the principal chooses not to try to fight to bring that person back.
Correct.
But we will allow them, because it's a year to year, they will be done at the end of that year, but however, they can still move over to another school. So the consideration then is, are we really going to check the references to make sure that we're not just passing, non-performers around from school to school? If a retiree is not doing well at a school, is it a law that says we can't give them some sort of evaluation so that we're not constantly moving them around?
There's no law in reference to an evaluation for them. If, with them being on that year to year, when they go to apply for that position, part of the process for them being hired is that principal gets a phone reference even if they're in district. So they should be calling the other principal, getting that recommendation from that other principal. And if there's not a favorable recommendation, we shouldn't be hiring them and placing them into that position. What we have done in the past is if someone gets a unfavorable recommendation, and the principal still pushes forward to hire that person, then we actually push it back to our executive directors. Am I correct on that? Make sure I'm correct. Our executive directors to make sure that that they want to move forward with this person. The ultimate decision, unless it is something that we cannot hire the person for by law, or if they don't meet the qualifications, falls into the HR realm. The principal still has that autonomy to hire folks. Now, we may tell the principal, you may want to go back and look at this. You may really want to do this. And if they still make the recommendation to hire them, we go to the executive director and see what the executive director says. And if they still move forward with it, then we move forward.
Okay. I mean, I know that the final decision is left up to the superintendent, but I think this is just something we should consider. Sometimes staff feedback is really important, and I don't know if we've had a good metric for evaluating that in the past, so that may be something we would like to look at. Staff as well as parents sometimes can give you some good feedback, and just because they're seeing differently than what we may see or you all may see as a school district administrator. So that's just some sort of something to consider.
Yes, ma'am.
And those were the only ones that I had. Thank you.
Great point about the parents.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kumas. 2.2 policy KF, Mr. Grant. And actually, you can just go straight through since all of yours are under the same.
Good morning, Commissioners. I have with me also Melvin Henry, our Executive Director of Facilities Management Services, and Ms. Felicia Jackson, who's in our Facilities Management Office that handles all of the rentals. So they'll be here to help answer any questions. So our agenda, we just want to talk about policy KF and just give an overview of that, a rationale for the updates to the administrative rule that we are proposing, and then highlights of what the updated rule is. And then we'll do an overview of Facilitron and how that connects with the updated policy administrative rule, and then an opportunity for any questions at the end. So policy KF is our public use of school facilities, and its purpose is to establish the basic structure for the use of our schools, not by our staff, but by outside agencies. The main key point that we like to emphasize is that it cannot be detrimental to Richland School District 1 students in our schools. It also allows for the rentals and establishment of the fee schedule, which is located inside of the Facilitron database. And then at this time, though, we're not recommending any changes to policy KF, but we have reviewed it. And it's always good if you're looking at the administrative rule to also review the actual policy that goes along with it. All right, so the rationale for updating the administrative rule, back in 2024, we began using Facilitron as our electronic online process. And it was put in place to make sure that we were doing things equitably across the district. Everybody was using the same system and that there was a standard process throughout the district. And also to make it easier for the public to review the sites for rentals. And we may talk about it a little later, but when you go into Facilitron, you can block out, the schools can block out areas of the school so somebody can immediately look and see if the auditorium at a school is available or a field is available without having to even make contact with anybody. They can just look it up and see if it's available on the dates that they want. The current administrative rule does not address an electronic process, which we've been using, of course, since 2024 and had outdated information. And so we needed it to align with our current practice and processes. So since the beginning of 2024, our team has spent about 16 months reviewing that administrative rule, making the changes, getting all of the wording exactly as it needs to be, and we're ready for those changes to be implemented to match what we're doing. Just a few highlights of the updated administrative rule. The biggest highlight is that it went from a 9-page document down to just a little over 4 pages. So we were able to clarify the types of organizations and what they might be expected to pay, meaning if you're going to be paying just for a facility or just for staff services and all of the different groups, we've clarified where you would fall under that if you're renting. We've also outlined the online application and fee payment process, including the fees for staff, which generally end up being the largest percentage of some rentals because we have to have different staff have different skills. And so you're talking about security, you're talking about custodial maintenance staff, you may have specialists from the IT department that may need to be on site, or you have to have your administrator that is also supposed to be on site for each rental. We also updated our limitations of use, and then we eliminated a lot of redundancies that were in I said previous administrative rule, but the current administrative rule. And so we've simplified everything. We had a full section about theaters that basically was redundant to the rest of the policy. So we were able to eliminate those redundancies and reduce the administrative rule. To update you on the way Facilitron connects to the updated administrative rule. So Facilitron is our online portal for all rentals. And the way Facilitron starts is that if you want to put in a rental request, you create an account with Facilitron, and then you begin that process by selecting a location, selecting the dates that you want to use that facility, or a portion, because again, you're not renting the entire school. You're renting a cafeteria, you're renting a field, you're renting the gymnasium. Facilities that are not available are automatically hidden from the renter. If you are outside of our timeline, facilities are hidden, meaning it's Tuesday. If you're trying to rent something this Saturday, it's going to be hidden because it doesn't give us enough time to take it through that entire process to get all of the approvals that are needed. And so we once you get inside of a couple of weeks, everything is going to be hidden from you, and you may have to contact the school or Ms. Felicia's office if there are any special circumstances that we need to work through. The renter, as they go through the process, they can see all of their costs. They can see their required documents, and those are their certificate of insurance that's required. They must sign the hold harmless agreement and then begin paying the fees for the approved online rental. They may pay a portion of the fees on the front end, and then final fees are delivered on the back end based on staffing that is needed for the event, because it's a little bit easier to not have to deal with doing refunds. Instead, if we say you're going to have to pay for 5 custodians, you know your maximum that you're going to be paying for, but one of the custodians might get sick and not work that day, and only 4 work the event. And so we're not going to charge the renter for the 5th custodian that wasn't there. So they will pay those on the back end. The approval process starts at the school level. So if you're trying to rent the gymnasium at a school, the school has the right of refusal. If they don't have the staff to work it, if they don't have the administrator that's going to be on site, if they have something that they didn't put into the system that they forgot about and the school's going to be using it, the school has that right of refusal for any rental. The same as if it's a district facility like our stadiums, Coach Matz would have the right of refusal if he's not able to find folks to be able to work those different events. And then it's reviewed by multiple departments. And that means the custodial department's going to review, security is going to review, theater services might review it if there's a need for technical, IT is going to review it if there's a need for their folks to work it. And then on the back end, it's going to be reviewed by Ms. Felicia to make sure that all of the documents are there, all the paperwork is there. And then the final approval is given after all of those folks have the ability to review. But understand that on the front end, if the school doesn't give you that initial approval, then the whole process stops, because that means they don't have what it takes, or they don't have the ability to make that rental to put it in process. And we want to make sure that they have that authority, because in the end, it's their building and it's their staff that generally work it. There are times that we may pull a custodian from one location to another to help out with the rental. But if school staff who know that building are not able to work, the principal or their facilitron designee will go in and just say, no, we can't approve this rental. And then they get a notification and we move on from that rental. And it may be that they say, the potential renter may say, can we select another date, another location? If it's a smaller event, they may say they need a gym. Columbia High might not be available, but they can then go in the system and look and see, hey, there's 6 other high schools and other middle schools. Maybe one of those would be available. And that happens fairly quickly. We also wanted to standardize the time frame, making sure that folks aren't, when you do things last minute, it hurts everyone, because everybody's rushing around and trying to get everything in place. We want to standardize those timelines and block out facilities from being rented and submissions to not be made. We do understand that there are emergencies and there are times that we have to make exceptions and open something up, and we certainly work with our community on those. And then the link to Facilitron is easily accessible. It's on our district's homepage under the quick links. It's on each school's website. It's under Mr. Henry's Facilities Management Services website. So it's in multiple places on the district website for folks to be able to get started with that process. And then if there are any questions, last week we had somebody wanted to know where do we go, and we'll just send them to Felicia, and she'll be able to start working with them on getting anything through her office. All right, so that is an overview of the first of all, the policy that we're not recommending changes, and the administrative rule with a significant number of changes, and I think loaded inside of in board docs for you all. Normally, we just redline a policy or an administrative rule, but as you can see, we redlined the whole thing and kind of started from scratch. So that's why you see just a clean 4-page document, and then behind that's like that 9-page document that has the old or current administrative rule that we would like to move to the new one. So this time, if there's any questions about the process, the rule, or Facilitron, please feel free to ask those questions.
All right, thank you. I'll start off like I did with the last information item. Why did this come up now?
So because our process changed, we moved to an electronic process for Facilitron, and our administrative rule did not allow for an electronic process. Everything was written about, paper checks and those timelines and everything. We wanted to make sure it aligned with the practice and the process that are actually in place.
Yeah, I think you did a great job reporting that out, that you all have been working on it for 16 months. Just asking, could it have come earlier, or is just that it's now that it's being brought before us? Maybe overstating the question, just want to make sure. Is it something that we're dealing with that has finally got us to the point that we can address it now?
No, there's not a specific
Thank you.
incident that has happened. This is the time to have brought it forth.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, let me ask this question. Does this update provide equitable access to community groups or organizations in addressing underserved community need. And if I need to paint that picture a little clearer, I don't mind.
Yes, sir, if you could
Okay.
expand on that.
Does this opportunity of changing how we process rentals and facilities give aid, give access to community organizations or nonprofits that are impacting our underserved communities through direct educational opportunities, i.e. 100 Black men, i.e. The Urban League, i.e. Delta Sigma Theta, Zeta Phi Beta. You know, are these organizations giving access, equitable access to these opportunities?
Yes, sir. I believe that all of those organizations that you mentioned, we would be able to classify into one of our types organizations and allow them to use our facilities oftentimes for the cost of the staffing of the facility. Again, the rules are in there is for nonprofit organizations and organizations that serve our students.
Yes.
Specifically in our community. We have the ability to work with each of those groups to facilitate the rental process.
And hopefully, because we want to give equitable access, is there something in this process that provides reduced costs or waive fees?
Yes, sir. In each of the type organizations, there are fees that can be waived. There are some fees that we cannot waive, and that's usually for staffing, but the facility side of it. And then there may be times that we are able to work with staff that is already working to help staff an event, meaning we may need some custodial assistance and they may already be working in the evening. And if they can work to help staff that event in addition to their ongoing duties, then we're able to do that. And there may be no cost at all to the organization. But generally speaking, the organizations that you mentioned there, we have the ability to waive the fees for the facility rental side of it.
Two more questions, Chair. We're in this process, as it outlined, the percentage of these rentals, or the cost of these rentals, go back into the upkeep of these facilities. Is there a percentage that's being identified? Because while we're still, making it equitable and giving access, we still got to keep these facilities up. So is there a percentage in this process being identified?
I will have to get with finance to answer that because I know that when we receive the payments back from Facilitron, everything is paid through them. The checks are then turned in and then those are portioned back to the school on the facility rental portion. And I don't have that exact answer, but I can have that before Tuesday evening.
All right, last question. This is really revenue at the end of the day. That's why you are going to include business and finance. How is the revenue being used? Is that being identified in this new process or this update of the process? Is there anything in this process that outlines where the revenue goes?
I do not believe that there's a specific, the way that the school has to use it. My assumption was that it was going back into their student activity fund, which would allow the principal to have some say over how it's being used. Now, a big portion of it that's used for salaries goes into paying for the staffing of it. But you're speaking specifically on just the facility side. We don't have a specific rule of where that money has to go. Now the district keeps a portion of the money for things like additional power usage, I guess the wear and tear of a building. We would keep that. We also build in to our custodial rental, the fee for the staff. We build in the additional supplies that may be used. And so that is part of that as well. But specifically, we do not direct schools on where they have to use the portion that returns to them.
All right, that's all my questions. Thank you.
And just to add some context to that, I think to Commissioner Bishop's earlier question, just understanding what that percentage is that goes back to the district for upkeep I think is part of what I heard in terms of an answer to that. So we know sort of like how we are, because there's a use cost, right?
That's right.
And there's a wear cost on the facilities, on the grounds. And so we just want to understand how it is that we are using the fees to address that.
Absolutely.
And that was one of my questions, but I want to say this, Felicia does a phenomenal job with helping people with rentals. I mean, I don't know how she keeps up, but anytime someone calls me with a question, I refer them to Felicia and she makes sure that they're assisted properly. I only recall, and I know things have changed since I left, but I only recall like once getting a check back from the district. And so that was one of my questions that Commissioner Bishop asked is what percentage of it goes back to the school and where is that money deposited? Because a burden, this all sounds great and it works well, but the burden still falls back in the lap of the principal. And it's almost, you feel as though you're being a manager of a facility when your focus should really be on curriculum. So if I agree that a principal agrees that someone's gonna use their building, like you stated, it's up to that principal to make sure that there's custodians that are available or, making sure that this is covered. And I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can, not wondering, but we need to look at how we better manage that in a sense so that some of the burden doesn't fall into the laps of the principal. Because if I'm going to let you use the auditorium and you're doing on the weekend, to me, I want to be out of it and let you and whoever your organization is use it. Then there's another part of it is, I know that there are limitations as to what people should do, but I've seen for myself that if no one is out there inspecting, or if I'm not that principal that's going to come up there and say, no, you can't have this fryer on my concrete, people are going to do it. And so we may need to look at, if we're going to allow persons to rent facilities, that there may be someone who needs to ride around and check to make sure that those things are not happening. Living in the community, I've seen it. So I know that sometimes people slide by and things do happen. So that was a concern that I had. And then also we talked about nonprofits, and whether or not there's a reduction in cost for them. I got a call this weekend from an organization, and I told them I'd have nothing to do with that. I directed them to Facilitron. They said that the rate was extremely high. I said, talk to Felicia because she's going to be the one that can better address that for you. They wanted to use an auditorium, and they said it's like $6,000. Well, if that's what it costs to run it, then you have to pay it. But I can't waive the cost for you. You need to go through the right process. And my other question is, when I looked at Facilitron, for some reason, only 3 schools were populated. I don't know if I went in the right way, but when I went to the page, I could only see C.A. Johnson, Columbia High, and one other school. I can't remember how that is. So is it once you set up the account that everything populates? Because I know we have more than 3 facilities that are available. Mhm.
Thank you. Once you go in and set up an account, you have the option of selecting any of our schools. Sometimes it may populate based on maybe however it's flowing, but all you have to do is type in your school name or the space you want to use. And then when you type in the space you want to use, sometimes it will give you, suggest a few, locations for you based on, the information in Facilitron is based on capacity. Like say we have all of our auditoriums, middle school is smaller than high school. So if you're looking for a large event and you put in the anticipated amount of attendees, it will give you some of the options. But if you know exactly where you want to go, if you just type in the first few names or just the school name, or if you can go in, type in, if somebody's outside and new to the area, type in a zip code or something, and then you can the schools will populate. It's so many different ways to do it because everybody doesn't do it all the same way.
So let me ask you this question. We talk about the principals having the final approval on the date. Is there a window of time that you all ask the schools to preload their dates before it goes public? Like, do we put out dates 3 months in advance to go ahead and say, if I'm going to be using my auditorium, I need to go ahead and put those dates in at least 3 months in advance?
The schools, most principals this year, since we did class doing leadership, a lot of schools, which I'm happy to see, have started putting in their activities.
Okay.
So therefore, they get first dibs on their own space. Now, sometimes we've had the incident where it's not on the calendar and the site administrator at the school knows it's coming up. Therefore, they have the opportunity to say, no, we have another event scheduled for that time. It helps if it's already in. Most times, schools are have their activities in by October. Some go as far as December. It depends on our schools that have the high performing dramas. Like I use Dreher for an example, they have already started putting in a good many of their activities all the way through the spring of next year.
Okay.
But everybody does not do that. Some do it as they go along, but usually between October and December. October, most calendars are halfway full. By December, most of them are pretty much complete except for, you got the incidentals or the last minute thing. We want to have a change our date for our spring concert. Or then we also take in consideration the elementary schools will go over to the middle schools or high schools for different functions. So it may not come on the calendar during that time. But here again, most schools will reach out to the school they want to use and they know a date is coming up. So that gives them the opportunity to say, hey, this date is not available. And it just gives you the option to pick another date, or sometimes they will call me and I can help them find another date.
Thank you.
May I add, on the athletic side, because our athletic facilities are being requested often, as soon as their calendars are built for their season, then they're asked to go in, the ADs are asked to go in and block everything off, including practice time. So if you're practicing Monday through Friday in your gyms, just go ahead and block it off. It may not be for a game, but it may be that you need it for practices. Block off your stadiums, your outdoor fields, baseball fields, all of those, as soon as your calendar is known. They're asked to do that.
So, Mr. Grant, help me understand this just for looking at it from the top. You all said that custodial maintenance and all of that, they can see the process. And so are they triggered when something is supposed to take place at a location? And I'm only asking because went to a graduation in the spring and the air wasn't on and they said that they didn't know about it. How would something like that slip through? It was in an auditorium at the high school. I'm just asking, so.
Facilitron does not automatically schedule HVAC.
Okay.
Every school is responsible for submitting an HVAC request if there is any type of after-school activity, any curriculum, because we don't always know. For the rentals, we'll know what's in there, but you have to submit the HVAC request. When the application comes in on Facilitron, each school has the opportunity to identify a site administrator. Whomever they list on that for their site gets an email that, hey, an application is in. The same custodial, the area coordinators get a email. Everybody gets an email at the same time to say, hey, this is an event that's coming up. Nobody really acts on it until the school says, hey, we can or we cannot accommodate it. But everybody gets the same email at the very same time. If a school has a question or an administrator has a question, there's a comment section in there. They put the comment in, it goes to everybody in that group that the principal has designated as their person or persons to be contacted for a source of information. So the HVAC request still it's the responsibility of the school to put in for an event.
So why, because there's another burden on the assistant principal. So if everyone's looped in, why wouldn't someone in that department automatically go ahead and put in the HVAC request? Like, why does it have to fall back on the assistant principal in the building?
I think, so just so we have a operations, or we have an entire operations portal, and then each of our teams has their own forms on there, and Mr. Henry has his HVAC form on there. The main reason is because not every use of a facility after our normal hours is a rental of a facility. And so we want to make sure that that process stays consistent and goes directly to our energy manager, who can go in and update the schedule for that building. So right now, all of our HVAC goes into an unoccupied mode at the exact same time, unless there is something scheduled, which may or may not be a rental. Now, that may be something that we need to look at, potentially adding our energy manager in as a recipient within that group, and adding him in so that he can see all of those rentals, as well as on the other side where he gets a notification from a school that just because they block it off, like we may, school might be having their a play. And so they're going to be doing a performance for 5 nights, and they would have to go in and make that request to make sure that they have HVAC for all of those areas, for all of those evenings. It's not a rental because the school's doing it. But if an outside group, we may need to look at adding Mr. Nelson into that loop so that he can get that. And it may take a step out of what an AP or whoever that staff designee is, that would need to do for those rental events, as opposed to the inside an internal event, as we call them.
But so even with an internal event, because the district system is scheduled to shut down at a certain time, right?
Shut down, go into an unoccupied mode, meaning it raises the temperature before the air turns on. So if the occupied, it ends at 5 o'clock and it's at 74, the unoccupied might be, I think it's 80. So it won't turn on unless it gets up to 80 degrees.
Right, so if I'm at Horror Hill and I rent Lower Richland and no one put in HVAC for me, then it's gonna shut off at 5 and my promotion ceremony starts at 6 or 7. So that's what I'm asking.
Right. If it was done as an internal event and nobody then completed the request for the HVAC to remain on, because we wouldn't have known that event was taking place if
Yep.
it was just done internally. But that may be a good reason for us to look at moving Mr. Nelson into that group of approvers on the Facilitron
Okay.
group that gets the emails.
Okay.
Can I address one other question? And we recognize that the burden of a rental is on the school. And the principals do designate who their staff member is. We require, as part of this new process, is that there's an administrative staff member on site. We don't want an administrative staff member or designee. So for instance, if somebody is renting a gym, it may be that the athletic director, who would be the administrator for that, designates one of the coaches to be there. What we don't want that burden, we don't want custodial staff or security to be the person that is the point person that's also walking around doing the things you mentioned, making sure somebody doesn't have something there that they're not supposed to have. And we are also, we believe that those folks should have a stipend for being there for an event that is not part of their school school activities. So if an outside group is renting, an outside field and restrooms, we don't want the custodian being the one that is walking around saying, hey, you can't have XYZ there, or you all said there would be 150 and we see clearly that there's 300 people there. We believe that staff member, that administrator designee, is the one that should be there to help facilitate that. Hey, there's only 150 on their rental application, but there's clearly 400 people here, which triggers a different amount of money, because we would have more custodial staff or more services may have been part of that. So we believe that those folks should be entitled to a stipend for being there for those events and taking on the burden that it is to oversee the rental.
Thank you.
One last question. I would love to know the cost that we are spending on Facilitron in the budget annually. If you don't have it now, you can just send it to me later.
It's a percentage of fees paid is how they receive. So they take a percentage, I think it's 10% if I'm, so whatever a rental, a $4,000 rental, their fee is 400, and they collect that from the renter. So we don't actually pay them anything. They then return to us the $3,600 that would be remaining in that example that I just gave.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
No, ma'am.
Would you like me to go on officially to
Yeah.
the two other items? So the policy KF, the district administration does not recommend any changes at this time.
No questions for me.
No questions.
And for the last item, the district administration brings forth this administrative rule update as an informational item.
Thank you.
No questions from me.
All right. Anyone else has anything? No? All right. Can I get a motion?
No objection.
Without any objection, this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.